Hello, football fans in Hamilton from coast to coast and around the world. This is the fifth quarter show on YouTube, playoff edition. And sadly, as we all know, the Hamilton Tiger Cats will not be part of the playoff edition, at least on the scoreboard or on the football field. They are officially in off-season mode. But we do have a couple of football games that happened today that we're going to talk about here on the show, including one that just concluded at Mosaic Stadium, the Saskatchewan Roughriders beating the BC Lions 28-19. Saskatchewan is off to Winnipeg in what will probably be another epic showdown in the West Final between the Riders and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And in the early game, there were fireworks aplenty as the hated Toronto Argonauts, at least in Ticats country, the hated Toronto Argonauts dispatched of the Ottawa Redblacks 58-38, 96 points. Who had the over today? Holy macadam. Maybe we'll start with that game. And listen, we can talk Ticats football. We know that Tiger Cats players, front office personnel are in the news, whether it's Bo Levi Mitchell for most outstanding player finalist in the East up against Brady Oliveira, and Shamar Bridges up for Rookie of the Year. We can definitely talk about that on the show today. We can talk about the two ball games that happened today. Ed Hervey, is he going to remain Tiger Cats general manager, or is he going to be in Edmonton in a week or so, or maybe a little bit longer than that, and be anointed or introduced as their new general manager? That remains to be seen, and that will be very interesting to see if that happens, because it's going to have a domino effect here in Hamilton. Of course it would. And then what happens? In our last show, following the Tiger Cats' last regular season game against the Redblacks, there was one person in particular, I don't remember their name, who mentioned that, listen, this Ticats team could pick up the phone and say, hey, Danny Mac, we want you as the general manager. And I believe that same individual said, it wasn't me, also said, Buck Pierce, yeah, he could be our head coach. I don't think Scott Milanovich is going anywhere, but if Ed Hervey went somewhere, Danny McManus would certainly be a fan favorite to be the general manager of this team. All right, there's a number of ways for you to interact in the program today, including heading into the chat and firing away with your comments. Broadcast map just saying will be fun. That was earlier this afternoon when the Toronto-Ottawa game was still going. Email is open, and some emails are coming in. fifthquartershow@gmail.com. 5th, fifthquartershow@gmail.com is the email address. And you can also click the link in the chat. Join me on the Fifth Quarter Show Playoff Edition. We're not going to vote for players of the game today. I mean, if you will, that's fine. I'm not going to stop you from doing so. Primarily because I don't want to give a game ball or vote for player of the game for Chad Kelly, who I have to admit, after somewhat of a slow start, played pretty well in the ball game. Maybe we'll start with some stats and then we'll get into some of your commentary. And let's start with the game that just concluded in Regina. And it was a windy affair, was a close-knit battle in the first half, 13-13 after two periods of play. And then Saskatchewan, I thought, played a great third quarter and then had the wind in the fourth quarter and sealed the deal, outscoring BC 15-6 in the second half and go on to win 28-19. Trevor Harris was good today. Absolutely. 26-33, 279 passing yards and a touchdown. AJ Ouellette was more than good. 14 carries, 70 yards, 2 TDs, including that 30-yard backbreaker that he scored in the second half. Emilus over 100 yards tonight, 9 catches for 106. Keyshawn Johnson, 7 receptions for 66 yards. Schaefer Baker, 4 for 39. Jameer Thurman, the former Tiger Cat, led the way with 7 defensive tackles. That was a team high. Sales and Milligan and Lacombo, all with interceptions for the Roughriders, who were number 1 in the turnover ratio, had the best run defense in the Canadian Football League this year. I think they'll give Winnipeg a test. Not saying they'll beat the Bombers. They could, but they will definitely give Winnipeg a test. That is for sure. It seemed like the BC Lions almost all year long, especially tonight, it was go big or go home. They had some big plays and they had some fantastically entertaining plays, but just not consistent enough. And for the BC Lions tonight, Vernon Adams, 20 of 33, 317 yards, 2 touchdowns. Those 3 interceptions really hurt. Really hurt. And they didn't really use William Stanback, I thought, as much as they should have or were going to. And I know that Saskatchewan, as I mentioned, has the number 1 run D. But Stanback, just 7 carries tonight for 27 yards. He had almost as many receptions, 5 for 53. Justin McGinnis, the league leader among receivers, 5 receptions, 66 yards, 1 touchdown. Cotoy, 3 catches, 82 yards, 1 TD, did most of his damage on the game's opening touchdown on BC's first drive, a 56-yarder. Eberhardt with 3 catches for 53 yards. Hatcher pretty quiet, 2 for 47. And defensively, Hladek, 10 defensive tackles. That led the way for all defenders in this football game. So the Roughriders off to the Western Final against the Bombers. In the early game, Ottawa started out strong. And in fact, I thought they played a really good half. On the road, had the lead, 23-17, 13 seconds to go, left in the second quarter. They're kicking off. And I don't know if it was Bob Dice. I don't know if it was the special teams coordinator or if it was Richie Leone. They said, you know what, we're going to squib kick this. And I think if the Tiger Cats, especially their fans, caught any wind of that, they would have said, no, that's the last thing. Squibs don't work. And in this case, not only did it not work, it worked fantastically well for the Argonauts because Leone rings it off an Argonauts player, his squib kick. Toronto recovers on the Ottawa 40, 6 seconds to go. Haralahu field goal, and it's 23-20 going into the break as opposed to 23-17 for Ottawa. And from there on in, it was all Toronto. They had scored Ottawa, 38-15 in the second half. Absolutely obliterated the Redblacks in quarters 3 and 4. 2 pick sixes in the second half. In fact, in the fourth quarter, it was 24-12 for Toronto. 58 points in a playoff game. That's impressive. I hate to do it, but I got to give the Argos some kudos there. Chad Kelly had 2 incompletions. He was 18 of 20 and threw a lot of deep passes. He threw for 358 yards, 4 touchdowns. Kadeem Carey only had 9 carries, 43 yards. Kelly, a couple scampers for 29, including a touchdown. Mackay Polk, the game's leading receiver, 4 catches on 4 targets, 158 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. Devaris Daniels, 4 catches, 4 targets, 88 yards, 2 TDs. Kevin Mittal, 4 catches, 4 targets, 49 yards. And Herslow, who I thought had a pretty good coming out party, 4 catches, 4 targets, 47 yards, and a TD. Ungerer and Carey were the only guys who did not make Chad Kelly a perfect completion percentage. They each had a drop or a non-catch, if you will. Whit McManus continues to be a whirling dervish at the linebacking core, 10 defensive tackles and an interception. Franklin had a pick. And yeah, that was it for the Argonauts with the turnovers, including in terms of turning the ball over from Ottawa. Ottawa had the 1 turnover. Drew Brown, boy, he lit up the sky in terms of yards. 46 of 61, 476 yards, 3 TDs, 2 interceptions. But Ottawa could not run the ball, even if they wanted to. Braylon Addison lined up at running back. He had 4 carries for 17 yards. Dustin Crum, 4 carries for 1 yard. And that 1 yard turned out to be a 1-yard touchdown run. Drew Brown, 3 carries, 3 yards. Devontae Dedman, 2 carries, 4 yards. Pimpleton, 1 carry, -2 yards. Redblacks could not run. They didn't even plan to run the ball game. It was a complete air show. Maybe that was the thought going in. They saw a recipe for success in airing the ball out. And while they gained a lot of yards and scored some points, especially in the first half, not sustainable. Pimpleton, 13 receptions, 123 yards. Addison, 10 catches for 103 yards and 2 TDs, including that sweet one, which he grabbed the football in front of the defender's helmet from Toronto. Hardy, 7 catches, 83 yards. Ackland, 7 for 70 and 1 TD. Rhymes, 3 for 42. And Nick Marner, 3 for 24. And Money Hunter was Ottawa's leading defender with 5 defensive tackles. Look at the time of possession. You would think that Ottawa would have dominated this game. 39 minutes, 17 seconds to Toronto's 20:43. But it was the Argonauts who made the big plays and are going to the East Final in Montreal 1 week from today. How's that game going to transpire? I don't know. I do have a feeling, though. I do have a feeling that the Argos, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I hate to say it, but it's my gut telling me that this team is going to win the whole thing. I'm not sure how, I'm not sure why, but that's what my gut is telling me. Okay, let's get to the chat. Some comments coming in here on the Fifth Quarter Show on YouTube. You can click on the chat and obviously offer your thoughts. You can click the link in the chat, and if you don't see it, let me know, and I'll repost it as well, and you can join me here on the show. On X, the handle is @RickZamperin. Use the hashtag Fifth Quarter. You don't have to fool around with playoff edition or anything. Or on email, Fifth Quarter Show, 5th, Fifth Quarter Show @gmail.com is the email address. Okay, let's get to the comments in the chat. I have stalled for far too long. Harley says, as hard as it is to say not making the playoffs for the Tiger Cats, and then he goes on to say, it's hard to say as a Ticats fan right now. Okay, made a correction. It's hard to say as a Ticats fan right now, but win or lose, the Cats should have been playing today. Well, I mean, they didn't have enough wins in the win column, so I don't think they deserve to be playing today. I will say, though, that, you can, the two teams you got to compare in this case is Hamilton and Ottawa, right? Ottawa had a fantastic start to the season. At one point, they were 8-3-1. Hamilton had a dismal start to the season. At one point, they were 2-9. Ottawa struggled down the stretch. Hamilton was pretty much firing on all cylinders down the stretch, 5-2 in their last 7 games. But every game counts. Every game counts. And it was Casey Sales in the year-end media availability who said, listen, anyone who says that the CFL season starts on Labor Day, the old cliche, and back in the day, it did actually start on Labor Day. The season started on Labor Day. But in this day and age, it does not start on Labor Day. There are 7 or 8 or 9 games before Labor Day arrives, or sometimes even more than that, depending on how the schedule works out. So every game counted this year. They always do. And the Ticats did not win enough out of the gate. So I get your sentiment, Harley, but yeah, they didn't deserve to be in the postseason. Jen says, hello, I didn't watch because I hate the Argos. LOL. Hey, that's okay. That's okay. I will say that Toronto played very well. They played very well. They deserve to win the ball game today. And I know a lot of Ticats fans do not want to see this team beat Montreal. And should they somehow do, they do not want to see the Toronto Argonauts hoist the Grey Cup. In fact, and I know this for a fact, I think all Ticats fans and many CFL fans do not want to see Chad Kelly hoist the Grey Cup, given what happened in the offseason, his 9-game suspension this season, and here he is, 1 game away from going back to the championship game. We could talk about that. How do you feel about that? Would you be okay if Chad Kelly was there at the end of the day on Grey Cup Sunday, 111 in BC, raising the Grey Cup over his head? That would sting. Sting for a lot of people, for sure. Bill says, will Hamilton let Hervey speak to the Elks? Not sure why Hamilton would let him leave the Ticat GM role to take on the Elks GM role. So 2 things, Bill. Number 1, teams usually allow personnel, whether it's the GM or a scout or an assistant GM, or even someone on their coaching staff, speak to another team if their contract is up in that particular year. And in this particular case, Ed Hervey's contract expires at the end of this season. And so the report is out that Edmonton has asked Hamilton, listen, Ticats, we'd love to speak with Ed Hervey. Can we do so? And while no official word has come out from the Ticats camp, and I asked the question today and I did not get a response, I would have a hard time believing Hamilton saying no to Edmonton unless the Ticats, in their heart of hearts, or maybe they've already worked this out, definitely want Hervey back in the fold next year. Maybe those talks have already been had. Orlando Steinauer, the president of football operations, Scott Mitchell and Bob Young and the Stelco ownership, Hamilton Sports Group, may have already come to that determination that Ed Hervey, from a roster composition and roster building aspect, deserves to come back. And maybe those conversations were happening throughout the year. But aside from that, if the Ticats have already made the determination that Hervey is not their guy in 2025 and beyond, why wouldn't they allow Edmonton to speak to him? So if I'm a betting guy and putting my chips into the center of the table here on whether Hervey is the GM of the Ticats or not in 2025, I think I'm putting them all in to say he might be in Edmonton. I know I just said might, but because I don't know for a fact. I know he still has a house in the Edmonton area. Obviously, he has a long history with the Edmonton franchise. So yeah, I can clearly see Ed Hervey being granted permission, number one, talking to the Elks, and number two, for Edmonton to bring him in as the general manager. That's going to be one of, I think, many interesting things that will happen in the offseason tied to the Tiger Cats. And if Hervey goes, the dominoes start to fall. Who is the next GM? Does that GM want their own head coach? And, the list goes on and on. So we'll see. Randy in the chat says, I agree, Harley B. The Cats would have played better and beat the Argos, as in the season sweep. Boy, oh boy, if it was Hamilton in the playoffs, and maybe this is what Harley was trying to get to. If it was Hamilton in the playoffs today playing Toronto instead of Ottawa, even though the Redblacks, I'll give them credit, played a really good first half. Again, they're on the road. They had the lead going into the break. Despite the squib kick debacle, they played a good half. But if it was Hamilton in Toronto, number one, the entire stadium would have been sold out. Yeah, even the top level would have been completely sold out. Guaranteed. So that's point number one. Point number two, I don't think the Tiger Cats are losing 58-38 to the Argonauts. In fact, it might have been the other way, given how Toronto and Hamilton played each other this year. Would have been a much closer game. No doubt about that. And I don't know, the way the Ticats were going down the stretch here, they might have won this ball game. But coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? Bill says, in my opinion, Montreal might be in trouble next week. Bill, I think you're right. And, I said this a couple of weeks ago, and I made mention of it earlier in the program, is, my gut tells me this Toronto team hit its stride post-Labor Day, most certainly. Chad Kelly had a couple of games in him, and maybe by game 3 or 4, he was starting to click with the offense. Because it takes that time, obviously, to get the timing right and the whole kit and caboodle. But defensively, they're playing great. Offensively, he scored 58 points. I know there was 2 pick sixes, but the offense was virtually unstoppable today. And you look at Montreal, kind of similar to Toronto last year. They clinched many, many moons ago. They started resting guys. Fajardo was given a week or so off because of the birth of his child, which is fine. And that's an amazing thing. And he should be able to do that. But, the pressure for them to win down the stretch was nowhere near what it was last year when they went on that crazy run. What did they win? 9 in a row or whatever it was to go all the way to the Grey Cup. This year, they are the Toronto of last year. Toronto was 16-2 last year. They were resting guys. They had clinched weeks before the season ended. And so that edge that players are on and play to their peak performance, I think Montreal next week, we even saw it in the Winnipeg game, even though they played the Bombers really tough. I don't know if they're going to have that edge going into the game against Toronto. They might. And the way that they played against the Argos last playoff, they might just have it. Who knows? I mean, that's a team that can really turn it on any given day, especially with that defense. Absolutely. Jen says, I definitely don't want that in terms of Toronto winning the whole thing. And Harley says, I hear you, Rick. I'm just saying it's tough when your team's not in the playoffs. LOL. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it. It stings. Stings when your team is not in the playoffs. It absolutely blows chunks. Hey, we got Christian joining us here on the Fifth Quarter Show on YouTube. Christian, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Rick. How are you?
I'm okay. What's going on?
It would definitely sting if the Argos win the Grey Cup.
Yes.
And I think I would be out with most CFL fans here in the terms of saying it would definitely sting if Chad Kelly would host the Grey Cup over his head on Grey Cup Sunday.
Yeah, how would that make you feel?
Not very good.
Yeah, that's not a visual that Ticats fans,
No.
or I think many CFL fans, want to see given what happened in the offseason.
Yeah.
Because for me, and I've said this before, I thought Chad Kelly should have been suspended for the entire year. Like honestly,
really?
the entire year.
Yeah.
And so, he's given 9 games. Anyway, listen, it was the penalty that the CFL came up with. But I think there was a whole lot of wrong with that situation. The way the CFL reacted so late, right? It took them a whole week to say, okay, we're investigating this thing. Yeah, and I don't know. There was just too many missteps along the way from both the Canadian Football League and the Toronto Argonauts. And of course, obviously, Chad Kelly.
Yep.
So, hey, let me get your thoughts now that I got you on Ed Hervey. Do you think he's going to be the GM of the Ticats next year, or do you see him in Edmonton? What's your gut telling you?
I see him here.
You see him in Hamilton?
Yes.
Why do you feel that?
Because the defense is really young.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was all his fault. Like I said to you, last game of the season, I think Chris Jones changed a lot of our defense.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's your feeling that Ed might want to see this thing through, right? Well, a whole year with Jones as defensive coordinator, if they install him in that position,
they install him in that too,
yeah.
That's the thing too.
Which I hope they do. I mean, I
hope they do as well.
Yeah, I think he proved that he pushed the right buttons.
But here's the thing with that.
Yeah.
I think they should not elevate his role. Like, don't give him more hats to wear. Like, they do to Dave Dickinson in Calgary.
Yes, I get what you're saying, because as soon as you start piling on a little more responsibility, you kind of lose focus of the main thing, right? If he's defensive coordinator, Mr. Jones, that's all you're doing. Yep. Have at it, right?
Yep.
All right, Christian, I appreciate the call in. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and we'll chat with you in a week.
Too.
All right, take care. That is Christian on the Fifth Quarter Show on YouTube. You can join in on the fun as well. I just reposted the link in the chat. Click on it and appear on the show. I'm going to read a comment in the chat from Watson. Then I'm going to read an email, and then I'm going to show you guys and gals a picture. This one's from Watson, who says, the way our defense played this year, especially the secondary, the Argos would have boat raced us too. Well, hey, listen, Watson. I mean, the Ticats and the Argos played 3 times this year, and Hamilton won each and every time. So, yeah, who knows? It might have been 58-48, although I can't see Toronto piling up 58 points on Hamilton's defense, even though it wasn't amazing this year. But yeah, they were 3-0 this year. Let me show you this photo from the Argos Ottawa Redblacks game. I'm sure you all saw it today. This is during the game. This is not pregame. This is not postgame. This isn't at halftime. This is apparently head referee Andre Proulx and Chad Kelly, the quarterback of the Argonauts. Apparently Kelly said something to Proulx, something to the effect of that was a BS call. And it was a heated moment. And I guess Andre Proulx said, in this instance, hey, we're fine. We're okay. At least that's, the message that I got. They're sharing a laugh. Number one, I think it's okay only after the game. Only after the game. This is during the game. Stoppage of play. But during the game, TSN shows this. They fist pump each other. They're having a good chuckle. Oh, I didn't mean to say that, and yada, yada, yada. I think this is a bad look for Andre Proulx. And I think it's a bad look for the Canadian Football League. Yes, it shows that Andre Proulx is a human and he can have a good laugh, but not during a game. Can you imagine Ottawa's sideline thinking, what the F is he doing over there? And how can Andre Proulx be allowed to officiate any other game involving the Argos this year, or who knows, beyond? I don't know. Am I blowing this up a little too much, or are you guys on board as well? Just as I bring up this photo, big Ticats fan is joining us here on the Fifth Quarter Show on YouTube. Big Ticats fan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, buddy?
I'm not too bad. So what do you think of this photo?
This photo, it's like, what is this? Is this the NFL with the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes and the referees? Like, what are they doing here?
Yeah.
Like that is an absolute disgrace to our league and a joke. Like, oh man. I agree with you 100% on this photo. I'm shaking my head constantly right now because this is just absolutely absurd. Like, you do that after the game, whatever. That's how you guys are.
Totally.
That's an after game thing going, hey, yo, but it is what it is. You don't go in the middle of the game going, hey, my bad, or hey, congrats. That's so unprofessional. He should be fired.
Andre Proulx, as you can see, went over to the Argonauts sideline to do that.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing, though, is he's been in the league a long time. He's been an all right ref, but he's always been bad when it's been us. Like, there's games that we cost ourselves as Ticats where it's like, okay, yeah, we screwed up, but then there was those games we needed the most and we were playing good, clean football, the odd penalty, and then we get the stupidest calls, and it was always him calling it. And it was like, and now seeing him do this, it's like, you should be fired.
It's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. I could not believe it when I first heard about it. And then someone, Jen B in the chat, actually sent me the screenshot because I had missed it live. And then I saw it replayed later. And I thought, what in the world is going on? This is unacceptable behavior during a game, during a stoppage and play.
You're absolutely right. But it's funny that you're mentioning this and showing this photo because I was listening to it on the radio because I'm busy with family. Ticats ain't in it. So it's not like I'm going, okay, got to watch the game for a few hours. It's like, I'll listen to the game. I'll do stuff around people, right? We're not in it. It's still the playoffs. I still love the Grey Cup playoffs. But now seeing this and hearing about this, it's like, wow, this is really, really interesting and disrespectful at the same time.
Yeah. So let me ask you, I know you didn't watch too much of today's games, Toronto winning handily over Ottawa and Saskatchewan getting by BC. So we have Argos, Alouettes, and we have Roughriders and Bombers. Which two teams do you think meet in the final?
I want to see Montreal, obviously. I hate the Argos, being a Ticat fan, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're not going to pull off like a big butt kicking like they did or they got against themselves on their home turf this time last year in the Eastern Conference. I see it being a tight game. I'm hoping for the Alouettes, but I wouldn't be surprised with those pesky Argos. Other than that, in the Winnipeg, I got to say to you, Winnipeg fans, enjoy it while it lasts, because after this season, you ain't going to a cup for at least 10. Win or lose. Win or lose.
Listen, I think, win or lose, I think this might be Collaros' last run.
Yeah, and you know what? This is the thing, though, is I've always loved and respect Collaros ever since we picked him up from Toronto. And this is how we have to bite the bullet with him, is on how we kicked ourselves in the ass. I'm sorry, I'm going to swear a little bit, but we kicked ourselves in our ass getting rid of him when June Jones came in. And he picked Mazzoli over Collaros, even though Collaros was battling some injury. You just had to give the guy time, and then look what he's done. He goes back-to-back Grey Cup wins against us, let alone he loses the next two, and he's on his way. He's one game away from going to 5 straight Grey Cups, and he took us to 1 Grey Cup. And it's like, come on, man. Like, he was a dynasty in the making in this league. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer for sure. And it's just how we keep biting ourselves in the butt. for I should say it properly, kicking ourselves in the ass. Like, look at Anthony Calvillo. We drafted him, never gave him a shot, gave him away, and look how many cups he won.
Yeah, the record of success of Hamilton developing players, or at least letting them go before they fully develop and then see them become superstars elsewhere is it's an encyclopedia.
It is. And it's like, this is why I was saying last week, like, when we talked, it's with Bo, like, if he was having a bad season, the guy made the most passing yards this season, career high too, 5 touchdown career passes. I thought he did that with Calgary. I never thought it was 4. And he put up good numbers. Yeah, he's not perfect. He's made some mistakes, but he's got passion and pride. He wants to be Hamilton's Ticats Ricky Ray, like he said. He's not going to win multiple cups, but I believe he can get us 1 cup next year as long as they play their cards right. And to your last caller there, what was his name? Christian?
Christian, yeah.
Respect to him calling in. Appreciate that, buddy. And yeah, he understands it too. Like Ed Harvey, with all that talk right now, yeah, if he goes to the Elks, okay, I'm not going to be like, oh no, we're in trouble. But it'd be like, oh, okay, this is a little bit of a setback, but like, we're a small league and there's so many keys to it. And at the same time, you keep Scott Milanovich next year with Chris Jones, those two in Toronto. Look what they did with the Toronto Argonauts years ago, working together.
Mm-hmm.
Bring that vibe back. Like I said, make some adjustments, a new special teams coach. Definitely need that. And ever since Simone Lawrence retired, we haven't had that guy to put the pressure on the D line. Like we had Ted Laurent, we had Jagger Davis, who else with Simone Lawrence, obviously, and what's his name? That's with Montreal right now, Wayne.
Well, we had Tyrese Beverette with Montreal. We had Lorenzo Malden, who's starring for Ottawa.
Yep. Yeah, like and the way those guys clicked, like it was good. We didn't have that. And it's like, we need to beef up our defensive line. Receiver wise, listening to you earlier, yeah, we had 4 receivers that almost had, all of them had almost 4,000 yard seasons. Mm-hmm. That's killer. But I hope Smith stays. Like we said, White's playing his season out. Dunbar, I really like Dunbar. He did cost us with that big catch, and then he fumbled there. But that guy, he made his name in Hamilton. I say give him another year, but there's still a lot to improve and to adjust. But like, we got to go forward. If we lose a general manager, you know what? I'm not worried. It's just who you pick to bring in players and then go from there. Because there's teams that have players that everybody doubts and then win championships. You never know.
Yep. We'll have that discussion in earnest following the Grey Cup. In the 2 weeks following the Grey Cup, we're going to go through Hamilton's offensive, defensive, and special teams free agents, and we'll talk about who we want to keep and who we should hopefully target for other teams. So, big Ticats fan, hopefully you can join us then, and have a great weekend.
You too. I'll talk to you later, brother.
Take care. Big Ticats fan joining us as usual here on the Fifth Quarter Show on YouTube, and you can too. And if you want to comment further on this photo of Andre Proulx on the Argonauts sideline today during a stoppage in play, saying, Chad, we're okay. No harm, no foul. You can drop me a note on email, fifthquartershow@gmail.com. Click on the link in the chat, or just add your voice to the chat, and we'll have that discussion. So let's get to the email. I know some chatter is still coming in. This one is from Randy, who writes, happy playoffs, Rick. In the East semifinal, seeing Ottawa blow this game was like the result of eating too much Halloween candy. Upsetting and unsettling for East football fans. It was very predictable loss by Ottawa. The Hamilton Tiger Cats would have been a much better team and could have beaten the Argos, just like the sweep in the regular season. Western Final was close and tied going into the third quarter. Quarterback Trevor Harris was playing well. AJ Ouellette was effectively moving the ball well on the ground. Sask excelled in the second half. Randy goes on to say that hit by BC's Ely in the third quarter was a dirty hit to the head. No need for that kind of play, and he could have tackled differently. Lacombo's hit to BC's Hatcher was to the shoulder. A good, loud, large crowd in Saskatchewan. In the Western Final, my player of the game is AJ Ouellette of Saskatchewan. A great game also by Trevor Harris. Sask deserve to win this and to move on. Do they have enough to match Winnipeg? As for the East, Montreal will take it and defeat the Argos. My hope that next week Montreal dismantles the Argos. Next week we shall see Randy in Oakville. You can have your say on today's two games and give me your gut feeling on what is going to happen in the Grey Cup. Do you see the Argos going all the way? If not, I'd love to hear that as well. Okay, back to the chat. And let's get to Jen B, who says it makes it seem like they are being favored in relation to the Andre Proulx and Chad Kelly incident. Even during a commercial break, would be better to do that. I think it happened during the commercial break. It was a stoppage in play. It wasn't like they stopped the game for Proulx to go to the sideline. I think there was a stoppage in play. There was the commercial break. And then out of the commercial, we saw what had happened during the break. But even then, like, the game is still going. I don't have an issue with what Proulx did. I have an issue what he did during the game. Again, I would not have minded after the game if he went up to Chad to say, the thing he said was kind of blah, 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 and they have a good laugh. Okay, that's fine. The game's over. The game is over, but not during the game. I mean, am I overblowing this? I don't think I am. Randy says, wow, Andre Proulx should not have done this. It is not appropriate. We all have had concerns about his officiating in Hamilton. That is well documented. He is the Jake Ireland 2.0. Fan favorite to hate. Watson says, looks bad. Didn't have any bearing on how bad the running backs the Redblacks secondary played. And that is true. Yeah, listen, Andre Proulx fist bumping Chad Kelly in the sideline did not give Kelly magic and did not, make Ottawa's defensive secondary turn into a pumpkin. They were just poop, especially in the second quarter. Jen says he hates Hamilton. And Watson says the referees are not the reason for Tiger Cats' mediocrity. Fans blame refs when they cannot admit their tree has been a chronic losing franchise for a very long time. Or team, he corrects himself. Ken, a new person in the chat, says the announcement that Garney Henley's number will be retired was a championship move by the Tiger Cats. Absolutely, Ken. Absolutely. We talked about this. I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago in the last home game of the regular season for the Ticats, in which they announced during the first quarter that Garney Henley's iconic number 26 is going to be emboldened and not used by any other player starting next year, be at the home opener where the ceremony is held. And this is a long time coming. This is one of the most iconic, legendary, superstar, Grey Cup winning, most outstanding players in Ticats and CFL history kind of guy. And he's just as cool and awesome of a guy off the field than he was on the field. Long overdue. Long overdue. Brian says the Owls are going to win back-to-back Grey Cups. Oh, Brian dropping the mic here. Mic drop from Brian. The Owls are going back-to-back. Listen, I can see it. I can see it. The Alouettes are a very, very talented team, especially on defense. And I'm not saying that because I don't think their offense can get it done. I think they can. But let's not forget, Austin Mack is a big missing piece to the puzzle with this Alouettes team. Another one is William Stanback, who was a force in the playoffs, especially last year, not on Montreal. Now, they have Walter Fletcher, who's amazing out of the backfield, but not a William Stanback type of player. I think Montreal offensively might have a difficult time keeping up with Toronto if Montreal's defense does not bring its A game next Saturday night. If Montreal's defense plays like Montreal's defense and Montreal's offense plays even an average game, I think Montreal wins the game. Toronto has to play an almost perfect game on defense. I think their offense is good enough to score some points, but their defense is going to be the big question mark. And I know they stepped up with a couple of pick sixes today, but Ottawa scored 38 points on Toronto today. Montreal is probably looking at that thinking, wow, we can take advantage of this Toronto defense. There's no doubt about that. I'm just going to scroll back up to the chat here, and this was from Jan, who says it doesn't change the outcome of the game, but it's just a bad look by the Rough and the Argos. And yeah, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that Andre Proulx went to the sideline and all of a sudden Toronto won the game because of that. or he started favoring Toronto. No, it's just a bad, like optically, it looks horrible for a referee to go to the sideline mid-game to do that. Do it after the game. Watson says it better be Montreal and Saskatchewan. If it's the Anchors versus the Bummers, it instantly becomes NCAA NFL football season. I catch your drift, Watson. I catch your drift. Well, listen, if it's Toronto, Winnipeg, I think it'll be a good game. I will still watch. I know who I'm rooting for. If it's Montreal, Saskatchewan, I think it's a good game too. Listen, I think all four scenarios, Montreal Sask or Montreal Winnipeg, you get the rematch or you get, the defending champs against a team that has had a roller coaster of a season in Saskatchewan. If it's Toronto, Saskatchewan, that could be an interesting game. That could be a very interesting game. You get the whole Corey Mace up against, his former guys in Toronto. And if it's Toronto and Winnipeg, we're kind of going back a couple of Grey Cups ago and getting that rematch. So I think all four potential finals have some intrigue. And if it's Toronto, Winnipeg, I think it would be a good game. Really do. Bill says the CFL expansion, the number one mandate of the new commissioner, and was the failure to expand the reason Ambrosie is leaving. So, Bill, a good point and a good question. So let's talk about CFL expansion, because that has been, talked about for a few decades now, right? Like 1984, when the whole Atlantic Schooners kind of idea popped up. And here we are in 2024, still talking about it. And I get it. The mathematics of the Canadian Football League is a challenge. Because at the end of the day, do we need a 10th team in the league? I think the answer is yes. I think most people would say, it would make for a much better league. Make for more competition, even schedule, balanced standings, coast to coast, the whole nostalgic of intertwining all of Canada's fabric into this great game. But, and this has been the big but, is who out in Atlantic Canada, or let's just say even Quebec City, right? With the popularity of Laval, who, the Rouge et Or and Laval are averaging more fans in attendance at their home games this season than some CFL teams, which is crazy. Crazy good, but crazy. Crazy good for Laval. The fact of the matter is it has always and always will boil down to two things. Number one, where are they going to play? And I know there has been some options out there. I broadcasted a couple of games in Moncton, and it's a fabulous place. New Brunswick is amazing. If they plopped it in Halifax, that would be awesome. And if it's in Quebec City, it would be awesome. The bigger question is not where they're going to play, is who is going to own this team? Who is going to put up the money? And who is going to be willing to, for X number of years, accept a loss when it comes to revenue for this team? Because at the outset, they're not going to, unless they say, listen, before we get a team, we're going to build a brand new stadium. I don't see that being the case. I think we have a CFL expansion team. They're going to play in stadium A, B, or C. The revenue from that stadium, I don't think is going to be substantial enough to make up for the financial losses that owner or ownership group is going to kind of envision going in with their mindset in terms of, revenue coming in and expenditures going out. The next new TV deal, I think, expires in a couple of years. I might stand corrected. You can correct me that in the chat. And the next CBA expires in 2027. So I think we're looking to at least 2030, right? It's 2024 right now. I think we're looking somewhere in that 2027, 2028, 29 or 30 kind of year to really, I think, get a firm grip on whether or not we're going to have a team out there. But that is not the reason why Randy Ambrosie is not going to be the CFL commissioner come opening day next year. It might take a little bit longer than that. The last day in his tenure hasn't really been ironed out. It just says sometime in 2025. Could be right after the Grey Cup. The main reason is, as the story goes, that Ambrosie was looking for support for a contract extension from the board of governors, basically the league owners. And the vote we're hearing, from what I've heard, was 5-4 against. And, that really tells you everything you need to know if you're Randy Ambrosie is, listen, that is not going to, be a good scenario for me if I want a contract extension. Most of the owners, most of the board of governors are against that. And so I think the ownership groups want to see a commissioner who is going to build on those revenues, who is going to bring to the table some new revenue streams, some creative thinking from a business standpoint to put more money in their pockets. As owners, they want more money. You can't blame them, right? This is why they got into it. Number one, they obviously love the game. They love the cities that they're in, and they love making money. I mean, they're not millionaires or multimillionaires or billionaires for nothing. Can the next CFL commissioner do that? Randy Ambrosie's ideas did not work in terms of revenue generation. CFL 2.0, the whole global aspect to his plan, didn't really move the needle when it came to boosting revenue. Not even close. The whole partnership with Genius Sports and the statistics debacle, embarrassment that this league has kind of gone through, did not move the needle in terms of revenue generation. It wasn't really a revenue generation standpoint that they were bringing in this new realm of statistics. It was basically not only to improve the statistics, but get into more of the fantasy and the CFL wagering world. And right now the CFL is doing, a marginal job of intertwining. And you're probably thinking, I always see betting stuff. Yeah, we always see it. But in terms of connectivity, how many CFL fans are betting on CFL games? I haven't seen the numbers. I'm not even sure if they're available. I'd love to see them. But they are dwarfed. And it's not even close by betting on the National Football League or betting on MLB or the NBA or even the National Hockey League. The CFL is a distant, I was going to say fifth, might even be further than that because you have international soccer, whether it's the EPL or the Spanish La Liga or the Bundesliga or Serie A. All those entities from a sports betting scene dwarf the dollars that are being spent on the Canadian Football League. So while entities like TSN and other sports betting sites are targeting on the CFL, I don't think we're seeing the number of people diving in and adding to that revenue stream, if you will. So yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it was an expansion or the failure of getting into Eastern Canada that was paved the way for the demise of Randy Ambrosie. Was basically wasn't enough in terms of generating more revenue or more revenue streams for Canadian Football League franchises or ownership groups. Tom entering the chat saying, I see a Grey Cup rematch. Bombers, Alouettes. Bombers will regain the mug. And they could. I mean, they will be, I think, the hungrier team based on what happened last year. And Tom also says the TSN deal wraps up after the 2026 season, I believe. And Tom, I think you're right. Now that I see that 2026 in black and white, I'm thinking that is correct. And the CBA expires in 2027. Watson says, whoever the new commissioner is, we know it will be whomever the owners want and express their interests. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, the commissioner works for the owners, right? Think of the National Hockey League. And Gary Bettman has been around now for 30 plus years because the owners like Gary Bettman. Why do they like Gary Bettman? Well, Gary Bettman has been able, not to get off topic in terms of CFL and the National Hockey League, but Gary Bettman has, and this is proven, has delivered a lot more money to the other owners. Think about it. It's through expansion, right? Seattle, Vegas, Utah was a move, but a much more positive move. The Nashvilles of the world, Tampa Bay, Florida. You go through Dallas, you go through all these teams and markets that the National Hockey League in Gary Bettman's tenure has expanded to. It's astronomical. And every time there's an expansion, there's billions poured in at the end of the day. When you get to, expansion fees, you get to merchandise, you get to all sorts of different things that go along with running a hockey team and benefiting from that financially from the entire ownership group. The CFL's got to do that. Expansion isn't the only thing that is going to generate revenue for this team. Certainly, it's another revenue stream. The Canadian Football League has to think outside the box in terms of unique propositions to entice more fans to come to the ballpark, or more fans to watch if they're unable to come to the ballpark or unwilling to come to the ballpark. Better merchandising, and when I say better merchandising, I'm not talking about the quality, but I'm talking about a new formula for the CFL that entices teams and players to stay with each other, if you will, i.e., have more of the Simone Lawrences of the world stay with one franchise, right? Apart from Simone Lawrence in Hamilton, who's here for 10, 11 years, name me another Tiger Cat player over the last 15 years or even 10 years that was here for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. There's not a lot of them. Not a lot of them. And Scott Radley made this point too on the CHCH Sportsline podcast, which I and Scott was a guest on with Bubba. And he said, you look around on Ticats game day at Tim Hortons Field, and a lot of the people, and in many cases, they're 40 or 50 plus. They're wearing jerseys of Tiger Cats players from yesteryear, whether it's Hitchcock, McManus, Moriali, Mosca, Henley, Zuger. The list goes on and on. I don't think in all the games that Bo Levi Mitchell has been a Tiger Cat and has played in the stadium, I haven't seen one fan with a Bo Levi Mitchell jersey. There's probably the most. I just haven't seen it. From my vantage point in the press box, there's not one current Ticats player on the nameplate in the back with the numbers on the jersey that I have seen over the last 2, 3, 4 years. See a lot of Simone Lawrence jerseys. He's not playing anymore. We need a better formula to have players hang around teams for much longer. And maybe it's as simple as, everyone gets a guaranteed 3-year contract. I don't know. There's a start. Spitballing, but that could be something in the next CBA. Might cost teams a little bit more because if a player doesn't pan out, geez, now you're guaranteeing this guy 3 years, and he's not even on the team after a couple of months. I'm not sure economically would work in the Canadian Football League, but it's that kind of thinking that I think the league, the Players Association, the teams have to kind of toss around. And maybe they have, and they just haven't come to a consensus. That might be the case. Watson says Roger Goodell would be an even better example. Now, listen, Roger Goodell has done the global thing, and he's done it successfully. London, Munich, Mexico City. They were in Brazil this year. Now, while the games aren't, fantastic, probably because the Jacksonville Jaguars are playing in most of them, but they are huge revenue streams. Huge revenue streams. When you think of the exposure in these markets, the jersey sales, the hat sales, whatever they're selling with NFL team logos on them, creating new fan bases, and those new fan bases become consumers. What do consumers do? They spend money, aka revenue stream. Roger Goodell has hit it out of the park with his global 2.0, wherever the heck they're calling it, the National Football League. To a certain extent, the NHL is kind of doing that too. They just played a couple of games, Florida and Dallas in Finland. Earlier this year, they were in Sweden. And while those are traditional hockey markets, they're still splashing NHL team logos out there. The CFL has not done that. And so does the CFL play a game in Buffalo? Do they play a game in, Mexico City? Do they go over to London, England and try it out? I don't know. I don't want to hurt the feelings of the Canadian Football League, but I don't think it would be as big of a success as the NFL, because the NFL has already pretty much perfected it. And so if you're now a fan of the National Football League and you live in Europe and you hear that the Canadian Football League is coming over, you might be interested, but probably not to the exact same extent as the National Football League coming. because you are maybe a big fan of a particular NFL team. Watson also saying, on that note, a serious look at the amount of free agents available every year seems to be an issue, and the length of contracts offered is another issue. Yeah, I kind of just mentioned that. And I don't know if the 3-year guaranteed deal is worthwhile. It probably would cost teams much more money. But yeah, the free agency is the perfect thing to talk about in this kind of. And I just kind of referenced it with the jersey sales. But in terms of loyalty to a team, if you're a Ticats fan, you're a Ticats fan, right? But I'm sure it pains you like it does me when you latch on to a player, when you become a fan of player A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and on and on and on. And then after 1 year or 2 years, that player is now in Calgary or BC or down the highway in Toronto. We've seen it both ways, but it's hard to make that commitment financially to buy a jersey of one of these players these days, because in a couple of years they could be out of the league, right? It has really hurt the Canadian Football League in terms of brand loyalty, if you will. It's really hurt the Canadian Football League, and it has this is nothing new. It has for a long time. And is there a perfect antidote to fix this? Probably not. Probably not. And if it is, it's probably going to cost some money that CFL teams and maybe even fans are unwilling to pay at this point. Ken says the team in the Maritimes would take Pierre Carpelado, approaching the McCain or Irving families and selling them on it. No existing stadium is a real problem. I mean, yeah, stadiums, it would be similar to Percival Molson Stadium, which is a university stadium. It's got capacity now is 25,000. It used to be 20 for a long, long time. But it would be something of that ilk, 20-ish thousand, smaller kind of venue, doesn't have all the bells and whistles like Tim Hortons Field or Mosaic Stadium, or, it would be a basic kind of stadium. But I think the long-term plan would be to build something permanent with many of those amenities. But the owner is the bigger thing to me, because you already have those venues right now. And they might just take a little bit of tweaking to get up to snuff, or at least close to. But who's the person, or who are the people? And maybe it's a community-owned team. I don't know. I have my doubts on that one. Is there going to be enough people in some Atlantic Canada city? Let's just say Halifax. That's been, probably the most popular city talked about. Are there enough people willing to put enough money down to say, yeah, we want the CFL and we're going to be the ownership group. We are now the owners, like they've had in Winnipeg, like they've had in Saskatchewan, like for years they had in Edmonton. Are they willing to do that? And can you do that nowadays from a community-owned franchise? Is the financial wherewithal in said community there? It's hard sometimes to get people on the same page for a simple, suburban master plan. Now you're bringing a Canadian Football League franchise to the city. I don't know if the community-owned scheme or system would work in that case. Not in this day and age. The Winnipeg, Saskatchewans, Edmontons, that was done years ago when the economics were much, much smaller. And let's face it, life was much, much simpler as well. And maybe it was easy to do, or easier to do. It's definitely easier to do, because it was done. It would be almost impossible nowadays. But I'd love to see a 10th team. That would also allow the Canadian Football League to start the year basically at the same time. Training camps in May, start the season first couple days in June, and you would end in early, maybe at the latest, mid-November. Because now that you have 10 teams, you don't need a bye week per week for one team, or 3 teams in some cases. You probably need one bye week all season. You have an 18-game season, you have one bye week somewhere in the middle or somewhere along the line, and there you go. It would be awesome. There's no doubt about that. I want to remind you that after the Canadian Football League playoffs, so 1 week from tonight, again, it's the East and West final. I'll be on with the fifth quarter show on YouTube once again. We'll do this whole thing again, talking about Toronto, Montreal, Winnipeg, Saskatchewan. We'll preview the Grey Cup, obviously. Hopefully we won't see Andre Proulx visit one of the quarterbacks on the sidelines during the game. And then, of course, Grey Cup 111 in Vancouver. That's going to be a blast. I'll be hosting the show once again after the Grey Cup. And then in the week following the Grey Cup, so Tuesday, November 19th, is going to be the debut of the fifth quarter show Seasons, in which we look back every Tuesday on an iconic season or a legendary Ticats team in a particular year. And I'll give a bit of a history lesson. We'll have a lot of fun learning and being entertained by what happened way back when. And then every Thursday, so this would be starting November 21st, Ticats Legends. We're going to look back at some of the most memorable characters when it comes to players and coaches and owners or front office personnel. There's so many to choose from. We'll do so throughout the offseason. Also, we will have a free agency show, 2 of them, in fact, in the week following Grey Cup 111. So that's obviously on a Sunday, November 17th. The fall or that week, probably do it on a Friday or maybe on a Saturday night. We're going to do free agency Ticats offense and then free agency Ticats special teams and defense. And we're going to talk about some of the players that are on Hamilton's list as free agents, certainly the players that are already signed for 2025 or in some cases beyond. And maybe we'll create a wish list on which players we'd like to see in black and gold next year. We'll have a lot of fun doing that as well. This coming Tuesday as well, another edition of Sober Second Thoughts. That's going to continue throughout the playoffs as well. And every Thursday, picks, props, and predictions when I look at the sports wagering scene. I'll have to double check to see how I did today. I know I got one right and one wrong. We'll have to see the third pick, prop, and prediction. My name is Rick Zamperin. Thanks for subscribing, watching. Give it a like, give it a subscribe if you haven't done so already. The fifth quarter show on YouTube. It's going to continue throughout the Canadian Football League season. And so looking forward to next year when the Ticats kick off again. It's going to be, I hope, a phenomenal campaign. We'll see you in a week's time here on the fifth quarter show on YouTube. Have a great rest of your weekend.